Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Sam Knowles. Joining us today is Jean-Baptiste Bouzige, the CEO of Ekimetrics. The company describes itself as a pioneering leader in data science and AI-powered solutions for sustainable business performance. Jean-Baptiste is one of the founders of Ekimetrics, a business he launched in 2006 after starting his career at the agency DDB. At DDB, he was in charge of developing analytics and modeling methodologies. He's passionate about finding innovative ways to deliver simple insights from complex methods for better business decision-making. And Ekimetrics is increasingly focused on helping businesses become sustainable for the long term. Jean-Baptiste also teaches data for marketing at the HEC Business School in Paris on the Executive MBA program. He's a graduate of both the École Polytechnique and the École des Mines de Paris, where he specialized in applied mathematics and microeconomics. First of all, Jean-Baptiste, it is a pleasure to have you join us here today. Welcome to Data Malarkey.
Thank you, Sam. Always a pleasure to talk with you.
Very good. Now, can you tell me, is that a decent summary of who you are and what you do? Is there anything you'd like to add? Anything that I've got wrong?
No, it changes all the time. So I could, as we have launched a company 16 years ago, we could, if we want to go into the details, we could refresh it every 2 years because nothing is like what we have done 16 years ago. But I guess we will have time to talk about it because in the end, to really deliver insights, nothing has changed. The recipe is still the same.
Good, excellent. Listen, I'm looking forward to talking to you about your take on insights. But before we get down and dirty with the data, I wanted to go a little bit beyond the CV, beyond the resume, and start with a question that's designed to get to the heart of you. And it doesn't necessarily ask you to tell us about the things that you do during your time at work. I can see some very interesting equations behind you on the wall. But tell us, if you would, Jean-Baptiste, how do you spend your time?
Yeah, so the way I spend my time, so first at work, is really different from what it used to be, I have to say. So there was a time where I was able to write this kind of equations and doing myself the models. Today, my job on top of managing the company, but I spend a lot of time trying to capture all the things are evolving, building a vision, and writing it. My job is not to be a visionary; is to build a vision based on all the goodness our people are producing, all the things I see outside, and it's always about focus. So that's where I take pleasure because. Writing is the thing that is interesting me the most, even outside of work. And that's how I began also my career at DDB. At first, I wanted, even as an engineer, I wanted to be a strategic planner. And as it was impossible back then to be a strategic planner as I was an engineer, I started to do modeling because that's what I was trained for. And then I found this position, but I still find that our job is kind of strategic planning, meaning writing stories that are building the vision for the future. So that's how I like to spend my time. And sometimes I spend my time just building things for my board or for my investors, but most of my time is thinking about how we can have a compact and appealing vision.
Excellent. Now, tell us, in the company that you lead, in your day-to-day role, what role does data play in what you do and what you do deliver at Ekimetrics?
So for us, it's more than central because data as a raw material is the raw material on which we are building everything. So really, it's really our daily focus. I think that if we talk about data as something raw, so really the raw material, that's something that is probably misunderstood or underestimated. It's the fact that the first work you do on raw data is probably one of the key success factors for everything, because the quality of it, the availability of it, being able to go for data that is not existing in the system can make a difference. So really, I would say that on top of saying that as we are building AI model, data is central for what we do, it's even more central because really working on this raw material makes a huge difference in the end in the potential of what we can deliver.
Can you describe what sort of data is most important to you in your work? I mean, I'm sure you don't discriminate and say we'll only use this and we won't use that. But what kind of data in the models that you're building is really important to the work that you do?
There are several ways to answer this question. But first, I would say that what is important for me is decision-making data. And surprisingly, often it's not really well archived. So meaning that companies are investing millions for, to have all the cookies data or to build systems on really micro problems. And sometimes they are not able to say what they have spent for discount last year. They have controlling data, but not really the decision-making data. So if I take the example of automotive, it's easy for them to tell you that the money they give for discount is, I think, 3 to 5 times higher than the money they spend in advertising. But to know exactly what they give the dealership when Sam is coming to buy a vehicle and for which type of discount, it's archived nowhere. So really, this kind of decision-making data, the data that is explaining exactly the decision that is made, is the most important for us, because in the end, we are building models we are kind of building the way to the best analogy for what we built is the production of decisions. So we need to be able to split and to break down the way the decision is made based on these small elements. And the second thing that is another way of looking at it is the more specific I am, the better. So it's to evaluate, to assess data available. The most important question is not what is in the system, is once again, how do you describe specifically your business? And if you have a big business phenomenon to follow, even if it means to create a new data or to build a proxy at first, it's more important to have this data than taking what is already existing.
What challenges do you face in making sure that data is useful and usable for you? I mean, in terms of ensuring it's clean or intact, are there specific challenges that you face time and again with clients' data?
So for sure, it's fairly surprising to see when we have something that is called a data review. So when we collect the data, we just display it, and we try to tell a first story based on that before the model. And it's surprising to see that sometimes at this point, we have already challenges to align people on a few definitions. I remember a client in luxury where I had as many definitions of loyalty as the number of people in the room. So meaning that their way of looking at it was different. Another case in automotive where in an executive committee, we realized that they talked about performance with different numbers, with different definitions in mind. Was it on just retail performance or all clients? Was it on orders or was it on registrations? And it changes a lot of things. So often you have to build the vocabulary to give meanings to the data, and that's a business challenge. Then, of course, there's a question of data quality and data completeness. Still, it's funny to see that even if we keep innovating, even if we are more and more powerful, the first reasons for a data project to fail are always the same. It's about purpose and about data quality. algorithms are not the first problem to come. So it's always simple, but it's because actually it's a question of legacy, because we inherited of the data that is built sometimes for supply chain, for SAP, sometimes sometimes for the production line, sometimes, and we need to build the vocabulary for insights, decision making, and that is one of the least invested topic in companies, and that's a shame.
Yeah, I feel your pain in terms of getting a single company view and getting a single company definition. Completely feel your pain. Am I right in saying that everybody, and you have several hundred consultants working in your different sites around the world at Ekimetrics, am I right in saying that everybody is a data science, or at least has a data scientist, or has some data science qualification?
So today we are 400. So in Paris, London, New York, and Hong Kong, and our first conviction was that the way we can make a difference is not only through the performance of algorithm, but that the best data scientist is the best translator. So it's a question of balance. So our first USP has always been this dual profile between data and business, being able to speak both languages. So meaning that the same people are talking to the client and are building the models. That was important. In that translation, it's not two worlds, it's more and more three worlds. So you have algorithm, tech, and business, meaning also that the profiles are more and more diverse. So you have data engineers, and then you have MLOps, and soon you will have prompt engineers for generative AI. So meaning that now we have kind of the range of this profile, but always keeping this idea of being a translator and speaking both languages.
Your work in Ekimetrics is increasingly focused, am I right, on helping companies become sustainable for the long-term future. Can you tell us a bit more about how you are harnessing the power of AI and data science to help achieve this goal of sustainability?
Yeah, maybe first where it comes from, because we have, our goal is really to build competitive advantages for our clients. So the topics we are covering are really about impact. So we are not covering a space of micro optimization on ad serving, etc., which has value, but it's really a specific case. We are more talking about what is your pricing strategy in an inflation context. How do you build your brand power over time? How do you embed in your personalization strategy really the DNA of your company? So building algorithms that are able to tell a story, etc. So as we talk about competitive advantages, and that as a company we are engaged, so we are a mission-driven company, we are currently certifying for Big Corp. So we are it was clear for us that the competitive advantages of tomorrow will be shaped by climate change, directly or indirectly, through a few forces, the most powerful one being regulation, but also exposure to risk, be it climate risk or geopolitical risks that are often linked. Consumer needs, we see that with food or even with beauty. Competitors, new pure player that are native for sustainability, and even employees. You see companies that are not directly sustainable having difficulties to hire people. And based on that conviction, we have said, okay, we need to play a role for that, because we have an alignment of what we believe as individuals and where we want to see our company internally, and the fact that we want to build competitive advantages. And looking at that, actually, we have started with an offer around how AI can support the sustainability function. always having in mind that where AI can bring additional value to a carbon footprint specialist, for example. So scaling that, completing missing data, building scenarios, optimizing, etc. And then we have seen that most of the potential was that what we had in hand and what we have built to basically steer the strategy of a company from ROI, personalization, pricing, supply chain, etc. We had a hub for redirection of business models. So today, it's still a proactive thing, but it's in our mission. So that's clearly in our status. We have objectives about that. But proactively, we tell our clients, okay, you have something that is today long term. You say that you have a trajectory for 2030, sometimes even further. But to steer this trajectory, you need to put all your functions at the service of that. And we have the tools to accelerate or enable this kind of pivot. So meaning, for example, you have a product portfolio. In your product portfolio, you have products that are more or less carbonized. You can pilot your mix marketing ROI to drive change without losing your legacy and your performance. You want to understand what are the clients that will drive the change. You can have something about are they eager to change or not? Who will come first? Who will be an influencer, etc. You have something really interesting with inflation because driving change and you have a premiumization of goods to include sustainability, but actually with inflation, you don't want to have a change that is only for the wealthiest person. So you have this social role and also within the climate, the planetary boundaries. So you have a lot of interesting questions that need to be operationalized because today the topic of macroeconomics, the political topic, is pretty well addressed, but the operationalization of it is not addressed. And what we want is to build the set of tools to address that.
You talk about a number of the categories that you've got recent experience in. I'm thinking kind of automotive, where clearly there's a huge legacy issue in terms of carbonizing and decarbonizing. Consumer goods, luxury, single-use plastics, packaging, and so on and so forth. Presumably, when you start working with a client in probably in any sector, candidly, but in one of those that maybe have been particularly polluting or have contributed significantly to climate change over years, you're able to tell pretty quickly whether they're serious about a long-term sustainability future because you can help them to build that roadmap that will get them to a sustainable future.
Yeah, for sure. It's never easy to see who is really serious about it, even if it's. I believe that companies are cynical about change. They change, so that's why we need a regulation, because you need to create the incentives. And I don't say that judging people. It's just that when you are a pricing manager in an automotive company, you cannot solve an impossible equation. If you are asked to sell more cars, no matter the motor, you will do your work to sell more cars. Your work is not to save the planet. So you need to create a set of incentives to align the goals, and that's the role of the C-suite and even more of the regulator. So I don't see. I see the companies taking that more and more into account and less as a corporate communication topic, but more as an operational question. And what we need to do is that we have companies that are more mature, and the more mature company are the ones that are more exposed today, where their business model is more at risk. Automotive, due to the European regulation, they have to they have to change. They have to redirect their product mix. So that's where we embedded first a carbon footprint calculator in our marketing optimization. So today they optimize against volume, against profit, but also against carbon footprint. And I'm not talking about the impact of advertising. I'm talking about the indirect impact, because the product they sell have a carbon footprint. So that's 99% of the impact. So you have this, and then it's a question. That's where I say it's proactive. So meaning that, I don't know, for quick serving restaurants, we push proactively to anticipate the taxation on beef. So it's because we tell them we will include a module about that. Today it's a bit far for them, but tomorrow it will have a huge impact on their business model. If you tax the beef at the level of carbon emission, they have to create a plan for vegan proteins or for chicken. I don't know. So that we need to. The most difficult part is today. I think that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it will be part of the business model. Once again, due to the forces. The most difficult part is now, because we are not expert in carbon footprint. We are expert in accelerating the change thanks to models, algorithm, and make it possible. So I don't want to judge the companies, because we have our own problem to solve, etc. But I want to accompany them to identify the most important topics.
And I think without doubt, I think in certain sectors, clearly we're already seeing this, but without doubt, there'll be that force of regulation, but also married with what your declared objective is, which is to give this competitive advantage. The two will coincide: the competitive advantage and the long-term benefit for the planet, without doubt. You mentioned earlier that you're talking about your team and data scientists and engineers and so on, and that you're going to be in the very near future. You'll have generative AI experts. That'll be an expertise that's across the company. Do you feel excited? Do you feel nervous or threatened? How do you feel about the sudden emergence of AI tools into the hands of everyone, from ChatGPT and Bard and Bing and the rest of it, and many, many more besides? Does it make your job easier or harder with all of these tools suddenly available to everybody for $20 a month?
We'll see. I'm pretty excited, because it's as I've told you, it's always exciting to make your vision evolve and always stay loyal to your convictions and loyal to your will to create value for your clients. I'm not nervous about it, because for me, so it's a true revolution. And you see that we are entering the age of AI. Bill Gates was saying that the age of AI has begun, and that's the biggest revolution since 1980. So I'm born in 1980, so it's funny to be part of it, and I feel what is exciting is that, first, instead of talking, I'm more than happy to have this as the buzz compared to the buzz on metaverse, and more than happy that we talk really about it. We see that for not the first time, but it's one of the first times where, in the promotion of a new tech, we talk a lot about the limits. Often, especially in the marketing tech world, you have this habit of thinking that the last solution is the new magic and that it will solve all your problem. But here you had a lot of education and articles about the limitations, allowing us to explain how you create value, how do you overcome this kind of limitation, because you need to master what you do, you need to be able to explain the result of an algorithm, you need to be really relevant. So really it gives us a ground to explain the way we differentiate, while in the past, often it was difficult to basically fight against promises. So I find it useful for that. And then for our own work, it's exciting because especially it's funny because where we see a gap change is behind the scenes. I think for data creation, data labelization, that's really a revolution in our practice. For on the front end, it's really useful when you have a human-machine interface for conversation, etc. But it's not so. You have a limited set of usages. But for all the creation of data, labelization, etc., it's huge because it allows us to unlock a lot of things. So I'm excited because it's and we see that we have just published something where we use ChatGPT, or we use that kind of technology for a climate Q&A, so around the IPCC report, and we see the buzz. It's beyond what we were thinking, because people think that we're able to do something that is curated, sourced with this kind of technology. They say, "Oh, how is it possible? Finally, we find something positive about this, positive usage of this kind of technology. Can you explain us how you do that?" And then we explain this question of breaking down the production line and putting ChatGPT only at the place where we think it brings maximum value, but doing a lot of work before and after, so that it's sourced, that we have no hallucination, etc. So that's a way to promote our good usage of data. So I like it.
No, good. No, I share your excitement, and very, very smart to put it at the place where there is no hallucination. Some of the hallucinations I think are quite hilarious. I was talking to a long-term collaborator who was writing. He's doing kind of, having had a career, he's now doing a PhD in political communication, and he just thought it would be an interesting exercise to get ChatGPT to write the general introduction that he was writing to his thesis, and just to see what type of structure we can come out with. And he asked it to give some credible references. And the references indeed were credible. They were the people who you would expect to see cited in the journals you would expect to see cited, that were complete, that with the types of titles for those journal articles that would be about right. And they were completely fictitious. So I think you're very smart to include it at the right place. And indeed, we'll include in the show notes, we'll include a link to your report. That report sounds fascinating, and a really interesting use of the technology. Can I ask you a bit about insight and about your approach to insight? I think you'll probably agree that the word insight has for many years in marketing services in particular been thrown around like confetti. You know, people will say, we've got millions of insights into people who buy this or that. My feeling usually when they say that is you might be lucky to have one or two. I think that insight is it's profound and useful. It's profound because it says this is what the data tell us, and it's useful because, exactly as you say, it enables us to then make decisions, data-driven decisions. What's the approach that you and your team take to extracting insights from data and then to using them to shape your clients' decisions?
As I've told you, it starts from the very beginning. So I was telling you that the two main reasons for data projects to fail are about purpose and data quality. So if you want to reverse the statistics, so if you look at, for example, the Gartner statistics, something like 75% or 80% of projects are failing during the proof of concept phase. I can tell you by experience that if you look after 3 years, what are the data projects that are still delivering value because they are industrialized, adopted, probably you have less than 5% of projects that are still alive. And we are beating this statistic, so it's more 99% of delivery in year one and 75% that is still alive after 3 years, because it starts by asking yourself, what is the business question? Data is never an end in itself. So you need to have this big goal really well framed and a set of what we call golden questions. But these are business questions. And already using data to answer this question in the end, so that the fact that your deliverable is taking the question one by one and answering business question instead of talking about data is the first thing. The second thing is that if you don't use the right data, you are limited. And the right data is the data quality and the breadth of data to be able to really answer this question. So here you have kind of archaeologist work sometimes to really say, okay, if I want to be able to talk about price and discount, I should do something, as explained earlier. If I don't do that, I will talk only about, media and product, and all my results will be biased because I don't talk about something that is important for the client. So this archaeologist work is really important, but also when you do so, you acquire the vocabulary of your client. So I have an anecdote for that. I had a few years ago a senior data scientist telling me we should have more interns on that project because data collection is really difficult, and that's not my job to do to check for data quality, etc. And we should give that only to interns. And I was telling him that's a moment where you acquire the vocabulary. That's where you will be a good senior data scientist for your client in the end, because you will know exactly where it comes from, what are the quality issue, and you will have built the vocabulary within. So it's really important in that sense. And the second important thing about that is that you ask yourself, what is the question? What is the data that is really used by my client in decision making? Because I don't want to have a layer of insights based on data that is not the exact APIs they use for decision making. Once again, if I take my question of price in automotive, their decision is about discount by type of discount for the client. It's not an average discount as it's archived by controlling. So I need to speak the same language, and the same with the processes. I need to understand the right moment to deliver. Someone at Forrester gave me a few weeks ago the right wording. It's not about real time, it's about right time. What is the right time to deliver? And then I often tell my data scientists that I don't want them to talk about data when they deliver. I want them to talk about business models. So meaning that, once again, if I take the ROI modeling example, I don't want them to explain layer by layer, saying, okay, media, here are the insights, price, here are the insights. I want them to be able to explain what is the business model 101 for this vertical. And if it's about peak times, then product launch, then we need to deliver the insight following that structure and that framework. So that's where it's always a question of business framework, being able to deliver in a business framework. And it's the same when you deliver an asset, because we deliver more and more tools and less slides. When you deliver an asset, you need to think about the context. And it's even more difficult because if you're wrong about the way to deliver, you're not there to tell the story. So you need to understand the way they ask themselves the question, and when they want to double click, when they want to have something that is visual, when they want to have something that is directly extracted in their systems, etc. So it's really a question of design thinking of your decision making.
You answered, without doubt, you've answered my next question, probably next two questions about the ways that you believe it's best to combine data and story, narrative and numbers together. it seems to me you're saying that by knowing and understanding the data that you're working with, and also by speaking the same language as the clients that you're helping to make those decisions, you're naturally going to be able to blend those in the right way and not overwhelm them with too much data and not throw that at them, but rather, you learn to speak their language using the language and the models that you yourselves have developed in order to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And that looks fairly simple. But what is funny is that because it's simple, because it's a blend, it's not so easy to replicate that kind of model. And on top of that, we are in a market that is really capital intensive and where people want to invest in technology. So having that kind of hybrid model is not what investors primarily like. So when we see small boutique companies that have the same kind of conviction as we have, often we see them pivot and lose a lot of value because they want to embed that in one size fits all product instead of keeping that balance in the recipe. And that's where it's I won't say that it's a protected market, but it's not so easy to be in that sweet spot between the activation products and the strategy. And that's also, once again, looping back to your question about what is my job and where we take pleasure. It's you need to reinvent yourself to keep that balance. So that's what is exciting when you have something like ChatGPT running.
Very good. Now, listen, last year you interviewed the Princeton psychologist Daniel Kahneman on how difficult it is to persuade individuals and companies to tackle climate change, the way that we discount the long-term future. How was that?
To be honest, it was my dream. So when we built the event with PR agency, we made a list of potential speakers, and I told them my dream would be to have Daniel Kahneman. So it was really great because my economics and microeconomics or behavioral economics are hugely important in the process as described, because I often say, and sometimes maybe my data scientists will tell you that I often say exactly the same things, that they are bored with that, but a good model, you should be able to draw that on a one page. You need to conceptualize. And that was a kind of a battle a few years ago when data science started to replace statistics. I had people telling me, I don't have to make choices. I can write a code to test all the combinations. And I had to explain them that to make a difference, we need to make choices. We need our own editorial line. We need to know the question we ask. I don't believe that you can find something without knowing what you're looking for. And for that, economics is so interesting because you have a lot of frameworks that are allowing you to draw on a one-pager the question you ask yourself and how to turn that in analytical words. If you do pricing, if you know the theory of utility, it's really, really important. If you do personalization, behavioral economics is hugely important. And that's a way then you break down your decision making, etc., etc. So that was a dream, because that was really at the crossing of something really technical and also being inspired. And Daniel Kahneman is so kind, actually. He spends so much time thinking about your question, even if it's hundreds. He has earned that for so many times, etc. And spend time to think about it and being really in the discussion. It was a really nice moment, and having breakfast with him and the team before shooting the interview was probably one of the best moments of my career. Because you have something about transmission, I know that the word in English is not exactly the same. But it's a good moment.
No, it's a tremendous conversation, tremendous dialogue. I'll obviously include a link to that interview in the show notes because it's I've watched it 4 or 5 times, and you kind of feel I'm getting something every time. So well done is just my kind of look of admiration for getting that out of him. The Americans, I guess, would call this a Columbo question. My last question, really, for you before we find out where viewers and listeners can find out more about you and what you do is there anything about the way that you work with data that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you? Anything else?
It's always difficult because I speak too much, but maybe one point we haven't discussed is about industrialization. So really, we were talking about some of the things about the raw material data, but today, one of the main questions of our clients is about how to scale that in their system. So this is so we don't have time to talk about it in details, but once again, it's a question of design, industrialization by design. You have to be prepared. You don't do a proof of concept and then you think about scaling that. You have to think about it at first because not all the data sources are scalable. Not all the entities in the world are making the decision the same or have the same data sources. So if you build something in your most major countries, maybe you will have a problem, etc. So this question, I would say that this question of scaling thing and internalizing thing and the right level of partnership with external suppliers is an important question, and it's not a trivial question. So companies should spend time thinking about the best balance to have an acceleration, but then own the assets. So we can do a second episode about that, Nick.
That'll be episode 2 for sure. Finally, Jean-Baptiste, tell us where can listeners and viewers find out about you and about what you're up to online in social media? Where would you direct them?
Obviously, a lot of things are happening on LinkedIn because that's where we have, let's say, kind of a lineup of experts from Ekimetrics talking about all these topics. For French-speaking people, for the moment, we have a podcast, Eki Talks, about this topic of using AI for sustainable business performance. For sure, our website, ekimetrics.com, where we publish everything. And more than happy to have also incoming questions. So feel free to reach out to us on our website.
Jean-Baptiste, thank you so much for your time talking to us today, for sharing your approach to using data smarter. I think if there were more people with your pragmatic, but particularly your business-focused approach to making use of data, AI, data science for business, I think there'd be rather less malarkey in the world of data, AI and data science, and rather more data common sense. Jean-Baptiste Bouzige, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sam. Always a pleasure. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Data Malarkey, the podcast about using data smarter. To find out what kind of data storyteller you are, why not take our data storytelling scorecard? It takes just 2 minutes to complete and will give you a personalized report right away. Visit data-storytelling.scoreapp.com or follow the link in the show notes.